It's a common question that so many of you ask me. How the hell do I get faster underneath the bar, Sonny? Today you're gonna find out. And if you implement the techniques I teach you in this video, you're gonna make a lot more successful snatches when it gets heavier. Check out this video of Miriam, one of my one-on-one clients that's just started with the lifting zone. She's having trouble with her snatch, and this is a very common issue that I see people struggling with when it gets heavy. So let's start off by taking a look at Miriam's lift so we can really understand the issue that's being caused here. That's probably resonated with you a little bit, pulling the bar up and struggling to get underneath it. So let's take a look at this lift in detail. When we look at the setup position of Miriam, she's in a very, very good point when she starts the lift. The weight is in flat feet, the shoulders are above the bar, and the arms are staying completely relaxed. When the bar reaches knee height, you'll see a small amount of movement in the foot. So you'll see that the heels are starting to stay down here and the toes are flicking up a little bit as she's in this first phase from the floor. As we know, during extension, we'll have to move from heel to toe in order to be able to get the fully extended leg at this point. Sometimes this can cause a slightly early strike on the thigh. Now you'll actually notice the point at which she's making her initial contact is a little bit low, and as she actually hits full extension, the bar at this point has started to move away from the body. If we look at this in general, the actual bar positioning, although it's moving away a little bit, is still staying over the midfoot, which is great. That's exactly where we want the bar. However, after extension, as she starts to move into a transition, into a receiving position, you'll see that this gap is now created between her and the bar is now moving away from the body at this point. When the bar moves away from the body, what you'll now notice is instead of the bar being over the midfoot at this point, the bar is now out in front of the foot. And this is where the issue is caused. Now I'm gonna bring up another video so we can take a look at this from a different angle. Then I'm gonna show you what an expert lifter would be doing at this point and how we can start to implement this in Miriam's lift. What we'll see here on this lift in particular is as she's pulled the bar again from the floor, we've kept much better placement between her and the bar at this point through to extension. Now the point that I was getting at that happens here a little bit after extension is where the bar is staying over midfoot here, we're in a good spot. The bar is now moved out in front of the toe, so it's slightly easier to see from this angle. In order for Miriam to be able to get into the receiving position or even give herself a chance of being able to catch this bar, if we draw a circle around her head here for the moment, you'll notice that the head has to move excessively forward in front of that line that the bar originally was, so we're moving aggressively in this direction in order for her to be able to receive the bar. But this, in general, is still putting the bar at this point out in front of the toes when we're in the receiving position, which is the issue. So when we take a look at this video, what you'll notice that happens as we come through in this extension point is the backs of the hands start to point up through the middle phase of the lift. Now, if the backs of the hands start to point up towards the sky, this is what creates distance between the body and the bar. The further the bar is away from center of gravity, that's when it becomes difficult for us to move dynamically underneath the bar. Now, what you'll notice in this video below is after I extend, what I'm trying to focus on doing through the middle phase of the lift here is keeping the elbows higher than the hands. So you'll see how my elbow is staying higher than the hands and the backs of the hands are pointing forward as I come through into extension. The longer you can keep the elbows above the hands as opposed to letting the hands get higher than the elbows, which is what we can see happening here, the easier it is to keep that bar traveling vertically through the middle phase of lift as I transition down into my receiving position. The first thing that I like to think about is after we've hit extension at this point, I'm trying to think about almost picking my t-shirt up on the way through with the bar. By doing this, it keeps the elbow higher than the hand and keeps the bar traveling straight through the middle. The second thing that I like to think about is I have an imaginary wall in front of me. If I'm to snatch and come through the middle, if there's a wall in front of me, my hands would hit the wall. So I have to think about after extension, I have to keep the back of the hand down and the elbow high as I move down into my receiving position. This stops me having to move the body weight too far excessively forward into the receiving position. So they're two things that I think about from a technical standpoint. Another thing that we could do in terms of exercise selection specifically for Miriam to help improve this is doing some snatches from the block or from hang. Doing snatches from block and hang will specifically help her work on that turnover point through the middle phase of the lift. even doing powers from this position could also be equally helpful. So this is the most common cause of the issue that she's struggling with, the bar being too far away from the body, but there's also one other factor that will contribute to someone struggling to move underneath the bar, and that is making sure that the bar is reaching its maximum velocity when it reaches waist height. If the bar is slowing down when the bar reaches waist height, this is what can cause there not to be enough acceleration or float on the bar through the middle phase of the lift for us to be able to move dynamically underneath. So I'm going to explain this in a little bit more detail using a couple of diagrams on my whiteboard. So what we're going to talk about from now is what's happening from the start position to the extension. When the bar is starting at this height, i.e. the start position from the floor, this is when the bar is sedentary, so there's no speed, the bar is not moving at all at this point. By the time the bar reaches from start position to waist height here, this is the point in which the bar needs to be at its fastest at this point. So we have got to accelerate from this point to this point when the bar reaches its fastest. If by the time the bar gets to this point here, it hasn't accelerated enough, at the point where we change from extension position into receive position, the bar is not continuing to accelerate. So what we're trying to do, if we imagine this is start position, this line is time and this line is speed, by the time the bar is going from this point here to this point here, what we are trying to do is smoothly accelerate the bar so it's getting to its fastest when we reach this point here. By being smooth and accelerating smoothly over time to the fastest point being an extension here, that's what's going to allow the bar to keep moving in this direction as the body is moving down. So coupling this with keeping the bar as close as possible to this center line of gravity as the bar is moving, and if I kind of draw bar path in specifically like this, the bar is traveling like so, staying as close to that middle line as possible to where it will go into the receiving position. What we were noticing was happening with Miriam's lift is at the point where it's reaching here, not only is it slowing down a little bit because again she might be conscious or cautious to getting underneath the bar, but the bar is moving out in this direction. Hence why we need to focus on that elbows higher than the hands through the middle or picking the t-shirt up so it's staying close to center of gravity, but also to think about accelerating by the time the bar gets to this point. One of the drills that I like to include for an athlete that's struggling predominantly with this issue is to think about counting themselves through the first phase of the lift. So they'll come from the floor, they count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. When they get to 5 is when they accelerate. This helps keep the athlete to stay on flat feet for as long as possible before accelerating, to stop that early extension or the bar moving away, but also teaches them to fire in the acceleration at the latest stages of the lift once it's reaching mid-thigh in the pull position. Hopefully this has helped you understand a little bit about how to correct this common issue that people struggle with when they're moving underneath the bar. This is why it's so valuable when you're thinking about mastering or improving your Olympic weightlifting that you start off with an analysis. We always like to go through with our clients understanding, okay, what is the issue? Why is it an issue? And then how do we correct it? It means when we're constructing a training program, we can put in the key exercise and drills that the athlete specifically needs to be doing in order to correct their problem. This is what's ultimately going to result in more successful lifts.